An employee was working in the mansion when her daughter shouted, "Don't talk to my mum like that!" at the millionaire boss. His reaction changed everything forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and comment on where you're watching from. The March rain drummed against the bulletproof windows of the mansion in the Upper East Side, creating a hypnotic rhythm that contrasted with the tension hanging in the air-conditioned office of Robert Smith. At 42 years old, the real estate mogul had built an empire valued at over $200 million. But at that moment, his hands trembled slightly as he signed contracts that could expand his business into the international market. "Mr. Smith, the American investors have arrived," announced his secretary through the intercom, her voice echoing in the oak and granite-clad environment. Robert adjusted his Gucci tie and checked his Rolex. Punctuality was one of his obsessions, a reflection of a personality that controlled every detail of his business life with surgical precision. The mansion's conference room had been transformed into a true business center. The walls showcased paintings by contemporary American artists, while the glass table reflected the strategically positioned LED lights. Robert greeted the three investors with firm handshakes, speaking impeccable English learned during his MBA years in the United States. "Gentlemen, as you can see in the reports, our company has a consistent growth rate of 22% per year," Robert explained, pointing to the graphs projected on the wall. "The American real estate market offers unique opportunities, especially in New York." It was then that hurried footsteps echoed down the granite corridor. Even through the solid wood door, the sound of flip-flops slapping against the floor reached the conference room. Robert furrowed his brow. He had left clear instructions for no one to interrupt them during those crucial 2 hours. The door burst open, and Emily Johnson, just 16 years old, stormed into the room like a hurricane. Her curly hair was hastily tied back in a ponytail, her school uniform still damp from the rain. Her brown eyes sparkled with indignation, and her breath was ragged as if she had run from the mansion's gate. "Mr. Robert, stop it right now!" Emily shouted, her voice breaking the business silence like thunder. The American investors exchanged confused glances, clearly uncomfortable with the intrusion. Robert turned pale. His face, normally tanned from golf sessions at the country club, instantly lost its color. "Emily, what the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice came out louder than he intended, revealing a nervousness he always tried to hide behind his controlling facade. "I'm standing up for my mom." Emily walked to the center of the room, completely ignoring the looks from the tailored suit foreigners. "I heard you yelling at her in the kitchen a little while ago. She doesn't deserve to be humiliated like this." Sarah Johnson, Emily's mother, appeared at the door seconds later, her hands still wet from washing dishes, the floral patterned apron contrasting with the luxury around her. At 38, she carried a serene beauty that 8 years of domestic work had not completely erased. Her eyes showed a mix of panic and pride. Panic over the embarrassing situation and pride in her daughter's courage. "Emily, please go back to your studies," Sarah said in a soft but firm voice, her southern accent softening the words. "Mr. Robert, I apologize for the interruption. I'll handle this." "No, Mom?" Emily turned to Robert, her fists clenched. "You may have all this money, this beautiful mansion, these imported cars, but that doesn't give you the right to treat my mom like she's invisible. She's worked in this house for 8 years, wakes up at 5 in the morning every day, taking care of every detail so you can have a perfect life." The silence that followed was deafening. One of the investors cleared his throat awkwardly, while another checked his phone, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Robert felt the blood pulsing in his temples. His entire career was being threatened by a teenager who should be studying for the SAT. "You need to understand," Emily continued, now addressing the investors directly, her voice gaining impressive maturity. "This man you are considering as a business partner treats the people who work for him like they are objects. My mom graduated in education from a prestigious university, speaks 3 languages, but has to hide her qualifications to get a job because people like him prefer simple employees. Robert swallowed hard. That information about Sarah's education was new to him. In 8 years, he had never bothered to truly know the woman who took care of his home. The revelation hit him like a punch to the stomach. "Miss Johnson," one of the investors addressed Emily in English, "your passion is admirable, but perhaps this conversation should happen privately." "With all due respect, sir," Emily replied fluently in English, surprising everyone in the room. "If you're going to invest in someone's character, shouldn't you know who they really are?" Robert stood up abruptly, the Italian leather chair creaking under the movement. "Enough! Emily, get out of my office immediately! And you, Sarah, take your daughter out of here before I call security." "Go ahead and call security." Emily planted her feet firmly on the ground. "You can kick me out of here. But before that, I want these gentlemen to know that 3 days ago you yelled at my mom because she put too much salt in the food, when you were so stressed about business that you didn't even realize you hadn't tasted anything. Yesterday you scolded her because the towels weren't folded exactly how you like, even though she had worked 14 hours straight because your client party lasted until dawn." Each word from Emily echoed in the room like an accusation. Robert felt his authority crumbling. His carefully constructed image was being shattered by a girl he barely knew, but who apparently knew his flaws better than he did. "Mr. Smith," Sarah finally spoke, her voice slightly breaking, "Emily is wrong to interrupt your meeting, but she is not lying. If my work is not satisfactory, I can look for another job." Robert looked at Sarah, really looked, perhaps for the first time in years. He saw the dignity in her posture, the intelligence in her eyes, the silent strength that allowed her to endure his temper outbursts day after day. For the first time, he realized that this woman was much more than just an employee. The investors exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. One of them closed his briefcase and stood up. "Mr. Smith, perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. We need to process some information." Robert knew he was losing the deal. 8 months of negotiations, millions in potential investments, his international expansion, all crumbling because of a brave teenager who had nothing to lose. "No," said Emily, her voice now calmer but equally determined. "Do not schedule another meeting until he learns to treat people with respect. Because if he can humiliate a hard-working woman in his own home, imagine what he would do to employees who depend on him in other countries." The sound of the rain intensified, as if even the weather agreed with the tension of the moment. Robert remained silent, his mind processing not only the public humiliation, but the raw truth in Emily's words. For the first time in years, he found himself forced to question not only his business methods, but the kind of man he had become. The 3 days that followed the confrontation were the longest of Robert Smith's life. The mansion in the gardens, which had always been his refuge of tranquility and control, now echoed with a disturbing silence. Sarah continued to carry out her domestic tasks with the same efficiency as always. But there was a palpable distance in her movements, a respectful coldness that bothered him more than he would like to admit. On Thursday morning, Robert went down for breakfast at 7 sharp, as he always did. The oak dining table was impeccably set, a perfectly pressed white linen tablecloth, fine china, polished silverware shining brightly. The familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, mixed with the smell of fresh bread that Sarah bought every morning from the French bakery in the Upper East Side. "Good morning, Mr. Smith," Sarah greeted without looking up from the tray she was carrying, her voice polite but distant. She wore the same navy blue uniform as always, but Robert noticed something different. Perhaps it was her straighter posture or the way she avoided direct eye contact. "Sarah," "We need to talk," said Robert, carefully folding the newspaper he read religiously every morning. "Please, have a seat." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. In 8 years of work, she had never sat at the main table for a conversation. "Mr. Smith, if it's about what happened on Monday—" "It's exactly about that," Robert interrupted, gesturing to the chair in front of him. "Sit down. That's an order." Sarah settled at the edge of the upholstered chair, her hands clasped in her lap. Robert noticed that she kept her back straight, her chin slightly raised, a posture that radiated dignity even in an awkward situation. "I want to apologize." The words came out with difficulty from Robert's mouth. Apologizing was not something he did often, especially to employees. "Emily was right. I have treated you poorly." Sarah blinked a few times, surprised. "Mr. Smith, you don't have to." "I do." Robert slammed his hand on the table, making the cups clink. Realizing the aggression of the gesture, he took a deep breath and lowered his tone. "I apologize again. See, this is exactly what Emily meant. I can't have a normal conversation without it feeling like I'm attacking someone." For the first time in days, Sarah managed a shy smile. "You're going through a tough time with the divorce, the business negotiations. I understand that." "No," Robert shook his head firmly. "Stress does not justify rudeness. Personal problems do not give me the right to humiliate you." He paused, nervously fiddling with the ring he still wore on his ring finger. "Emily mentioned that you have a degree in education. Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah looked away towards the window, observing the carefully manicured garden where cherry blossoms were starting to bloom. "Because I learned that many employers prefer employees they consider simple, less threatening. If I mentioned my education, my previous experience, perhaps you would think I was too complicated for the job." "Your previous experience?" Robert furrowed his brow. "What did you do before working here?" "I was a university professor at NYU," Sarah replied softly, as if confessing a crime. "I taught education and educational psychology. I had a private practice where I worked with children with learning difficulties." Robert fell silent, processing that information. The woman he had seen only as someone who cleaned his house and prepared his meals had an academic career, specialized knowledge, a complete professional life that she had abandoned. "What happened?" he asked, genuinely curious for the first time. Sarah took a deep breath. "My ex-husband left when Emily was 8 years old. He left me with many doubts. He had taken out loans using our house as collateral to invest in businesses that didn't work out. I lost the house, the practice, everything." Her voice trembled slightly. "I needed immediate work, something that would provide a home and food for Emily. Domestic work offered that." Robert felt as if he had received a punch in the stomach. For years he had treated Sarah like a piece of furniture, never imagining the story of struggle and sacrifice behind those serene eyes. And Emily, how did she get that full scholarship to the private school? Sarah's face lit up with maternal pride. "My daughter has always been brilliant. When we arrived in New York, I enrolled her in an excellent public school in Brooklyn. She stood out so much that the teachers recommended her for the scholarship program at Ridgewood Academy. She took the tests and came in first." "She speaks English fluently," Robert commented, recalling the conversation with the investors. "I taught her," Sarah smiled proudly. "And Spanish too. During college I did an exchange program in Argentina and the United States. Emily has always been curious about languages." Robert fell, silent for a few minutes, stirring the coffee that was cooling in his cup. Finally, he looked up at Sarah. "The American investors cancelled the contract." Sarah tensed her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Mr. Robert. If it was because of what happened, it was exactly because of what happened," Robert confirmed. "And they were right. Emily made me see something I didn't want to see." He stood up and walked to the window, observing the gardens that Sarah always kept immaculate. Do you know what's most ironic? They said they don't trust doing business with someone who can't maintain respectful relationships, even at home. Sarah said nothing, but Robert could feel her gaze on his back. I have a proposal, he said, turning to face her. I want you to continue working here, but with some changes. Sarah's heart raced. What kind of changes? First, a 50% raise in salary. Second, you will have the right to use the library whenever you want. Third, if Emily needs help with her studies or wants to use the house computer for research, she has full permission. Robert paused. And fourth, I want you to teach me how to be a better person. Sarah blinked, confused. What do you mean, sir? You managed to raise a brave, intelligent and honorable daughter under very difficult circumstances. I had all the privileges in the world and ended up becoming a man who makes teenagers cry. Robert sat back down. My own daughter barely speaks to me since the divorce. Maybe you can give me some lessons on how to treat people with dignity. Sarah remained silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with emotion. Mr. Robert, may I ask a question? Of course. Why are you doing this? It would be much easier to fire me and hire someone else. Robert laughed bitterly. I tried. For the past 3 days, I've tried to imagine what it would be like to replace you. Do you know what I discovered? He looked directly into her eyes. This house only feels like a home when you are here. Since Camilla left me, you are the only person who can make this place not feel like a mausoleum of granite. The confession took them both by surprise. Robert rarely spoke about his feelings, and Sarah had never imagined that her presence meant anything beyond the work done. Do you accept my proposal? Robert extended his right hand. Sarah looked at the offered hand, then at the face of the man who had been her boss for 8 years. Slowly, she extended her own hand and shook his. I accept, Mr. Robert, but with one condition. What? Stop calling me Sarah. My full name is Sarah Eduarda Johnson, and I am very proud of it. Robert smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. Nice to officially meet you, Sarah Eduarda. My name is Robert Smith, and I'm trying to learn to be a decent person. 2 weeks after the handshake that sealed the new agreement, the routine of the mansion in Brooklyn had changed subtly but significantly. Robert discovered that the mornings had a different rhythm when he stopped to really talk with Sarah Eduarda during breakfast, instead of just scribbling numbers on documents while she served in silence. On Monday morning, as the typical April drizzle created a grey veil over New York, Robert went down to the kitchen instead of waiting for coffee to be served in the dining room. He found Sarah Eduarda preparing pancakes, her skillful hands spreading the batter in the non-stick pan with precise movements that spoke of years of experience. "Good morning, Sarah Eduarda," he greeted, noticing how she smiled upon hearing her full name. "Can I help with anything?" "You want to help me in the kitchen?" she asked, raising her eyebrows with a playful expression. "In 8 years, this is the first time I've seen you here in the morning." Robert shrugged, grabbing a cup from the cupboard. "I'm trying to break some habits." He watched her movements for a few seconds. "These pancakes smell different. What do you put in them?" "Family secret," Sarah Eduarda replied with a mysterious smile. "My grandmother taught me when I was little back in Nashville. She used to say that food made in a hurry doesn't nourish the soul." "Your grandmother was wise," Robert commented, pouring coffee for himself. "Is Emily okay? I haven't seen her in a few days. She's been studying a lot for the SAT. Her room has turned into an improvised library." Sarah Eduarda carefully flipped the pancake. "And she's still a bit embarrassed about what happened in your meeting. She thinks it might have hurt you." Robert nearly choked on his coffee. "Hurt? Sarah Eduarda, your daughter saved me from making the biggest deal of my life with people who were only interested in my money. The investigators I hired found out that that American company was under investigation for money laundering. Sarah Eduarda stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. Really? Completely serious. If Emily hadn't interrupted that meeting, I would be involved in a federal investigation right now. Robert shook his head, still impressed. Your daughter has an incredible instinct for people. How did she develop that? I think it was out of necessity. Sarah Eduarda replied thoughtfully. When you lose everything at 8 years old, you quickly learn to identify who is trustworthy and who isn't. Emily has always had to be mature for her age. The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted the conversation. Emily appeared in the kitchen, wearing jeans and a simple top, her hair still messy from sleep. Upon seeing Robert, she stopped abruptly, clearly surprised. "Good morning, Emily," Robert said calmly. "How's your studying going?" "Good morning, Mr. Smith," she replied formally, kissing her mother's forehead. "The studying is going well. I'm sorry for, about last week." Robert laughed. "You're apologizing for saving my business from an international scandal? I think I owe you an apology here." Emily blinked, confused. Sarah quickly explained about the discovery of the investigations. Emily's expression shifted from confusion to relief and finally to a shy smile. "So, I didn't ruin your life?" she asked. "On the contrary," Robert sat on one of the stools at the granite counter. "You did me a huge favor, and more than that, you made me see some truths about myself that I've been avoiding for years." Emily poured herself some orange juice, still processing. "The information. What kind of truths?" Robert hesitated. He wasn't used to opening up, especially to a teenager, but there was something in Emily's sincerity that made him want to be honest. "Like the fact that I've become a person that no one can truly respect," he finally said, "including my own daughter." "You have a daughter?" Emily asked, genuinely surprised. "I do. Emma. She's 15, almost your age." Robert fiddled with his coffee cup. "She lives with her mother in London since the divorce. When we video chat, I can see in her eyes the same look you gave me that day, as if I'm someone she prefers to keep at a distance." Sarah placed the pancakes on a plate and handed it to Robert. "Sometimes distance isn't about who we are, but about who we think we should be," she said softly. "What do you mean?" Robert asked. "Have you ever wondered why you act so controlling?" Sarah leaned against the counter. "I mean, I'm not being disrespectful, but it's an observation." Robert chewed the pancake thoughtfully. The taste was different. It had a sweet hint he couldn't identify, but it stirred a vague childhood memory. "My father was like that," he finally said. "A successful businessman, respected, feared. When I was a child, I thought being respected meant that people were afraid to contradict you." He paused. "I only realized in therapy, after the divorce, that there is a difference between respect and fear." Emily sat on the stool next to him. "Does your daughter fear you?" "I don't know if it's exactly fear, but—" Robert sighed. "In our video calls, she always seems to be walking on eggshells. She talks about school, friends, but never about how she's really feeling. It's like she thinks, I'm going to criticize or try to fix everything." "And do you do that?" Emily asked directly. Robert laughed humorlessly. "Probably. When she tells me about a problem, my first instinct is to offer practical solutions, not emotional support." Sarah and Emily exchanged a knowing look. "Can I suggest something?" Sarah said. "Next time you talk to Emma, try just listening. Don't give advice unless she asks. Sometimes people just want to be heard." "That sounds too simple," Robert commented. "The best solutions usually are," Emily said. "You want to know something? In the last 8 years, my mom has never complained about your behavior to me. I figured it out on my own by observing your interactions." Robert was surprised. "Really? She never said anything?" "Never. She always said you were a good boss, that you paid on time, that you respected her hours. Emily looked at her mother affectionately, but I saw how tense she got when you came home stressed, how she double-checked that everything was perfect before you came down for breakfast, how she sighed when she went to bed. Robert felt a tightness in his chest. Sarah, is that true? She avoided his gaze. You were going through a difficult time with the divorce. I didn't want to add more stress to your life. But you were sacrificing your own peace of mind to spare mine, Robert realized. That's not fair. Life isn't about fairness, Mr. Smith, Sarah said softly. It's about choosing how to react to situations we can't control. Emily finished her juice and stood up. I need to go to school, but can I ask one more question before I leave? Of course, Robert replied. Why are you really trying to change? It's not just because of the business you lost, is it? Robert was silent for a moment, considering the question. Because I realized I built a life where no one misses my company, just my services or my money, and that makes me lonelier than I ever thought possible. Emily nodded, as if she finally understood something. You know what's interesting? My mom always said that the loneliest people are those who build walls to protect themselves but forget to leave doors. After Emily left for school, Robert stayed in the kitchen with Sarah, watching her wash the dishes. She's very wise for 16, he commented. She had to grow. Up fast, Sarah replied. But I'm trying to make sure she doesn't completely lose her childhood in the process. And you? When was the last time you did something just for fun? Sarah stopped washing the dishes and looked at him, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, when was the last time you did something you wanted to do, not something you had to do? She was silent for so long that Robert thought she wouldn't answer. I don't remember, she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. I guess there's no time for that when you're always worried. About surviving. Robert felt something stir. In his chest, a mix of guilt and determination. Maybe it's time to change that too. May arrived with an unexpected chill that gave New York mornings an almost European feel. Robert had developed the habit of having coffee in the kitchen with Sarah, discovering that those morning conversations had become the most anticipated part of his day. On that particular Thursday, however, the atmosphere was different. There was a tension in the air that he couldn't identify. Sarah moved through the kitchen with mechanical efficiency, but Robert noticed that she avoided eye contact and responded to his attempts at conversation with polite monosyllables. When she dropped a spoon for the second time, he decided to intervene. Sarah, what's going on? He asked, gently placing his hand on her arm to make her stop. She sighed deeply, her hands trembling slightly. Mr. Robert, I need to tell you something, but first, promise me you won't get upset. Her tone made Robert's stomach tighten. All right, go ahead. Camilla is back, she said quickly, as if ripping off a Band-Aid. Your ex-wife. She arrived last night and is at the Ritz-Carlton. She called here, around 10, asking if you were home. Robert felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. Camilla, his ex-wife, the woman who had shattered his emotional world 2 years earlier, was back in New York. What does she want? She didn't say. Just asked me to let you know that she needs to talk urgently. Sarah finally looked him in the eyes. Mr. Robert, she seemed determined, and there was something in her voice that worried me. Before Robert could respond, the house phone rang. Sarah answered with her usual professional courtesy, but her face paled as she listened. One moment, please. She covered the phone's mouthpiece. It's her. She wants to speak with you. Robert hesitated, then reached out to take the phone. Hello, Camilla. Robert, darling. Camilla's melodious voice came through the phone with the same poisonous sweetness he remembered. How are you? You sound tense. What do you want, Camilla? Robert got straight to the point, feeling Sarah discreetly step away to give him privacy. "What rudeness, darling. Can't I just miss my ex-husband?" Camilla laughed, but there was a calculated coldness in the sound. "I'm at the Ritz-Carlton. How about lunch today? I have a proposal that might interest you." "I'm not interested in your proposals," Robert replied, his voice taking on the hard tone he had tried to soften in recent weeks. "Not even when it comes to Emma?" Camilla's question came loaded with a subtle threat. "Our daughter is going through some issues in London. I thought you would want to know." Robert's blood ran cold. "What kind of issues? Is Emma all right?" "Physically, she's great. But emotionally—" Camilla paused dramatically. "Well, maybe it's better if we talk in person. I'll be at the hotel restaurant at 1 o'clock. Don't be late, Robert. You know how I hate punctuality." The call ended before he could respond. Robert stood frozen, holding the silent phone, feeling old anxieties return like a familiar and suffocating tide. "Mr. Robert?" Sarah's soft voice brought him back to reality. "Are you all right?" "She mentioned Emma," Robert said, his voice sounding distant. "She said our daughter is having problems." Sarah approached, her expression worried. "What kind of problems?" "I don't know. That's exactly what makes me nervous." Robert ran his hands through his hair. "Camilla always knew how to manipulate me using Emma. During the divorce, she threatened to restrict my visits several times. But now you have legally established rights, right?" Sarah asked, pouring him a glass of water. Robert laughed bitterly. "Camilla never cared much about legalities when she wants something, and she's in London with Emma. Even if I have rights on paper, in practice she controls when and how I see my daughter." Sarah thought for a moment. "Can I give you my opinion?" "Please." "Don't go to that lunch alone." Robert frowned. "What do you mean?" "Camilla is counting on you reacting emotionally at the mention of Emma. She wants to leave. You vulnerable, out of your element." Sarah leaned against the counter. "If you go, be prepared. Bring your lawyer. She'll interpret that as hostility." "And so what?" Sarah crossed her arms. "Mr. Robert, with all due respect, you've spent the last 2 years blaming yourself for the end of the marriage. Maybe it's time to stop giving her the power to destabilize you." Robert looked at her with admiration. "When did you get so wise about relationships?" "When I had to raise a daughter alone while dealing with a manipulative ex-husband," she replied with gentle irony. "Men who use children as emotional chess pieces follow a very predictable pattern." At that moment, Emily walked into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, looking for something in the refrigerator. "Good morning. Why do you both look like you're at a funeral?" "Mr. Robert's ex-wife is back," Sarah explained, "and she wants to set up a meeting." Emily grabbed a yogurt and turned to Robert. "The mother of your daughter? The one you said can't have a normal conversation?" "Exactly her." Emily opened the yogurt and took a spoon. "Can I ask a somewhat invasive question?" "Sure," Robert replied, curious about her perspective. "Do you still love her?" The question caught Robert off guard. He opened his mouth to automatically say no, but stopped. It was a question he had avoided asking himself. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I think I love the memory of what I thought we had, but the woman who left me, who manipulated me during the divorce, that one I've learned not to love anymore." Emily nodded, as if the answer made sense. "Then don't let the memory blind you to who she is now." "Savvy," commented Sarah, smiling at her daughter. "I once heard that the best defense against manipulation is accepting that you can be manipulated," Emily continued, sitting at the counter. "When you admit your vulnerability, you can protect yourself better." Robert was impressed. "Where did you learn that?" "School therapy," Emily replied casually. "After my parents divorced, the school offered some free sessions. The psychologist said that children of divorced parents need to learn to navigate between two versions of the truth. Two versions of the truth, Robert repeated. Yeah, like, my dad always said he left my mom because she was too demanding, too complicated. My mom never spoke ill of him. But I saw the overdue bills, the creditors calling. Emily shrugged. Over time, you learn to see beyond the stories people tell about themselves. Robert looked at Sarah, who was watching her daughter with a mix of pride and sadness. You really raised an extraordinary person. She raised herself, Sarah replied softly. I just tried not to interfere in the process. The phone rang again. This time, Robert answered directly. Hello? Robert, it's me again. Julia's voice was less sweet now, more impatient. I forgot to mention, I brought some documents you need to sign about Emma's custody. Robert's heart raced. What documents? Nothing dramatic, dear, just some adjustments my lawyer suggested. You know how these bureaucratic things are. Julia paused. But they are urgent. I need to get back to London later this week. Robert looked at Sarah and Emily, who were watching his expression close up. Julia, any change in custody needs to go through my lawyer first. Robert, don't be paranoid. They're just formalizations of agreements we already had verbally. Her voice became slightly harsher. But if you prefer to complicate things, I can talk directly to Emma about her feelings regarding the visits. The threat was clear. Julia was prepared to further poison his relationship with his daughter. Robert clenched his fists, feeling old anger bubbling up. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. 1 o'clock at the Ritz-Carlton. Perfect. And Robert, Julia added, her voice regaining its false sweetness. Come alone. We don't need lawyers complicating a conversation between civilized people. Robert hung up the phone with more force than necessary. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with tensions he had hoped never to face again. Mr. Robert, Sarah said calmly, you don't have to do this alone. She made it clear she wants to meet without lawyers. Then bring someone who's not a lawyer, Emily suggested, someone who can witness what happens. Robert looked at the two women in front of him, one who had become his confidant and advisor, the other who had become an example of courage and integrity. For the first time in 2 years, he didn't feel completely alone in front of Julia. Would you both do me the honor of accompanying me to the worst lunch of my life? The Ritz-Carlton stood majestically on Vittorio Fasano Street, its Art Deco style contrasting with the grey May sky. Robert adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, while waiting for Sarah and Emily in the lobby, his nerves betraying the confidence he was trying to project. He had worn his best suit, a navy Armani that Julia had always praised, in an unconscious attempt to shield himself for the meeting. Sarah arrived promptly at 12:40, wearing a simple yet elegant blue dress that Robert had never seen before. Emily accompanied her, dressed in black pants and a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a bun that made her look older than her 16 years. You both look different, Robert commented, noticing how they seemed to have transformed for the occasion. Don't underestimate the power of the right outfit, Emily replied with a nervous smile. My mom always says that when you dress well, half the world respects you before you even open your mouth. Sarah checked her watch. We arrived 5 minutes early, just as planned. Remember what we talked about in the car? Robert nodded. During the ride, Sarah had been adamant. He should let her and Emily sit at a nearby table, but separate. They could observe Julia's body language and intervene if necessary, but without seeming like a direct confrontation. Mr. Robert, Emily pulled him aside for a moment. If she tries to make you feel guilty about your daughter, remember, parents who truly love their children don't use them as weapons. Gradually, the three made their way to the hotel restaurant. The atmosphere was sophisticated, with tables strategically arranged to create intimacy among the occupants. Robert spotted Julia immediately. She was sitting at a table near the window, wearing a red dress that highlighted her blonde hair, freshly done at the salon. At 40, she remained a stunning woman, and she knew it. "Robert!" Julia gracefully stood up when she saw him approaching, extending her arms as if to hug him. Her blue eyes sparkled with the same intensity he remembered, but there was something calculating in that sparkle that he hadn't noticed before, or had chosen to ignore. "Julia?" he replied politely, avoiding the hug and opting for a formal handshake. "You look well." "What coldness, darling," she purred, gesturing for him to sit down. 2 years away from me left you so formal?" Robert settled into the chair, noticing that Sarah and Emily had chosen a table, 3 meters away, close enough to observe, but far enough not to seem intrusive. "You mentioned issues with Emma." Robert got straight to the point. "What's it about?" Julia picked up the glass of white wine that was already poured. Apparently, she had arrived earlier. "Always so eager for business, Robert. How about we order something first?" "I'm not hungry," he lied. In fact, his stomach was too knotted for any food. "Julia, you—" She said it was urgent. She sighed dramatically. "Fine, if you insist." Julia opened a Gucci bag and pulled out some papers. "Our daughter is having emotional difficulties in London. She has been experiencing anxiety episodes, trouble sleeping." Robert's heart raced. "Why? What happened?" "Oh dear, you know how dramatic teenagers can be." Julia dismissed the concern with a wave. "But my private psychologist, Dr. Thompson, very reputable, thinks that the frequent video calls with you might be causing her emotional confusion." Robert felt as if he had been punched. "Emotional confusion? What do you mean?" "Well," Julia leaned forward, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone, "Emma always seems very agitated after talking to you. She asks questions about why you couldn't understand each other, why the marriage ended." Julia paused dramatically. "It's very painful for a girl her age." Robert glanced quickly at the table where Sarah and Emily were sitting. Emily had slightly turned in her chair, clearly paying attention to the conversation. Sarah maintained a neutral expression, but her eyes were alert. "And what is your suggestion?" Robert asked, although he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. Julia slid the papers across the table. "Dr. Thompson recommends a period of separation, 6 months without direct contact, so Emma can process her feelings without external pressure." Robert took the documents, his hands trembling slightly. It was a legal petition for the temporary suspension of his visitation and communication rights, based on medical recommendation to preserve the emotional well-being of the minor. "This is blackmail," he said, his voice low but filled with restrained anger. "Robert, what a terrible word." Julia feigned shock. "It's just what's best for our daughter. Don't you want her well-being?" "I want to speak to Emma directly," Robert declared, picking up his phone. "Oh dear, that's not going to be possible right now," Julia quickly said, covering his phone with her hand. "She's on a school trip in California. She won't be back until next week." Robert studied her carefully. There was something in her hurry to stop him from calling that didn't match the story she was telling. "Julia, what is the real reason for all this?" For a moment, her mask of maternal concern slipped. Robert saw a flash of something colder, more calculating in her eyes. "Fine," she said, her voice losing its artificial sweetness. "Since you insist on being difficult—" Julia leaned back in her chair. "I've met someone in London, someone important. And he is interested in adopting Emma, giving her his last name, a complete family, stability." Julia fiddled with the ring she wore on her finger, a ring Robert hadn't noticed before. "But this would be much simpler if you voluntarily renounced your parental rights." The revelation hit Robert like a lightning bolt. Julia had remarried and wanted to erase his existence from Emma's life. "Never," he said, pushing the papers back to her. "I will never renounce my rights to my daughter." "Robert, be reasonable." Julia tried to regain her sweet tone. "What kind of father have you really been? Bi-weekly video calls? A few holiday visits? Michael can offer her a complete family, siblings, financial stability." "I offer financial stability," Robert interrupted. "Yes, but you're here and she's there. And let's be honest, you were never exactly a present father, even when we were married." The observation hurt because it contained a grain of truth. Robert had indeed been obsessed with work during the marriage, leaving most of Emma's upbringing to Julia and nannies. "People change," he said, thinking of his morning conversations with Sarah and Emily. "I've changed." Julia laughed, a sharp sound that echoed through the restaurant. "Robert, dear, you don't change. You are who you've always been. A man who puts work above all, who treats people like employees, who can't have a real emotional relationship with anyone." Robert felt the familiar words, the same accusations she had made during the divorce. For 2 years, he had believed she was right. But now, after weeks of being with Sarah and Emily, he knew it wasn't entirely true. "You know what's interesting, Julia," Robert said, his voice gaining a firmness that surprised even him. "You're describing me as if I were exactly the same man who married you 20 years ago. But that makes me wonder, if I'm so terrible, why did you marry me? Why did you stay married to me for so long?" Julia blinked, clearly not expecting him to turn the accusation back on her. "And more importantly," Robert continued, "if I'm this terrible father you're describing, why does Emma always seem happy when we talk? Why does she send me pictures of her school projects, tell me about her friends, ask me for advice on things that worry her?" "Robert, you're being dramatic." "No, Julia. For the first time in 2 years, I'm being clear." Robert stood up, leaving the papers on the table. "You want me to sign these documents? Then you'll have to sue me. And when that happens, I will want to speak directly with Emma, with a lawyer present, about what she really wants." Julia stood up as well, her composure finally crumbling. "Robert, you're making a mistake. Michael has a lot of money, many connections. He can make your life very difficult." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice from an ex-wife who still cares about you," she said, but there was ice in her voice. Robert looked at her, really looked, perhaps for the first time in years. He saw a beautiful, intelligent woman who had decided that her path to happiness involved removing any obstacle, including him. And for the first time, he felt pity for her, not anger. "Julia, I hope you find happiness with Michael, really." Robert took the documents and tore them in two. "But Emma is my daughter, and I won't give up on her. Never." He turned to leave, but stopped and looked back. "And Julia, the next time you want to blackmail me, remember that I'm no longer the man who let himself be manipulated out of fear of losing you. I've already lost you. I survived. I'm much better off without your version of love." Robert walked toward the table where Sarah and Emily were waiting, feeling lighter than he had in 2 years. Behind him, he could hear Julia calling his name, but for the first time he didn't turn to respond. The drive back to the mansion was filled with contemplative silence. Robert drove his BMW along the FDR drive, watching the grey city through the windshield fogged by the drizzle, mentally processing every word of the conversation with Julia. In the passenger seat, Sarah discreetly flipped through the torn pieces of the documents Robert had brought with him, and Emily, in the back seat, was furiously typing on her phone. "Mr. Robert!" Sarah broke the silence as they stopped at a traffic light near Central Park. "Can I make an observation about what just happened?" "Of course," Robert replied, grateful for the distraction from his own thoughts. "You were magnificent." Her voice carried genuine admiration. In the last 2 years, you've blamed yourself for the end of the marriage, convinced yourself that you were an inadequate father, isolated yourself from any real human connection. She turned to face him. But today, you confronted her like a man who knows his own worth. Emily stopped typing and leaned forward. My mom is right. When she started that talk about you not being a present father, I saw your expression change. For a second, I thought you were going to believe her again. I almost did, Robert admitted, accelerating as the light turned green. For years, I've heard those same accusations. I started to accept them as truth. But this time was different, Sarah observed. What changed? Robert thought about the question as he entered the mansion's garage. I think you too changed my perspective. In the last few weeks, I've discovered that I can have real conversations with people, that I can care about someone's well-being without trying to control them. He turned off the engine, and I realized that if I can do that with you, I can do it with Emma too. Emily smiled. Speaking of Emma, I just looked her up on Instagram. She showed her phone. Your daughter posted a photo 3 hours ago from a school trip in London, not in Scotland. Robert took the phone and saw a selfie of Emma with her schoolmates, clearly in a London museum. The caption read, Art history with the girls, at least we're not in the rain today. London forever. Boring school. Julia lied about the trip to Scotland, Robert murmured, feeling a mix of relief and anger. That means you can call Emma right now, Sarah suggested. Robert looked at the clock. It's 7 p.m. in London. She must be having dinner. He hesitated. But what if Julia has already talked to her? What if she has filled Emma's head with stories about how I'm a terrible father? There's only one way to find out, Emily said pragmatically. Call her. The three of them went up to the mansion, but Robert felt his legs heavy as lead. What if Emma really wanted to cut contact with him? What if, after all these years, she had decided that her stepfather would be a better dad? In the living room, Robert sat on the Italian leather sofa while Sarah and Emily settled into the nearby armchairs. With slightly trembling hands, he dialed Emma's number via WhatsApp. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Dad? Hi! What a surprise for you to call at a different time. The relief Robert felt upon hearing the genuine joy in Emma's voice almost made him cry. Hi, Princess. How are you? I'm good. I just got back from an exhibition at MoMA with school. It was kind of boring, but the photos turned out great. Emma paused. Dad, is something wrong? You sound a bit strange. Robert looked at Sarah, who gestured encouragement. Emma, can I ask you something? How have you been feeling about our conversations? Do they make you anxious or hurt you? In any way? What? Emma seemed genuinely confused. Dad, where did that question come from? Our conversations are one of the best parts of my week. Robert felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders. I just wanted to make sure, Princess. Dad, you're acting a bit weird. Did Mom say something to you? Emma's voice grew more serious. Robert hesitated. He didn't want to put Emma in the middle of the conflict with Julia, but he also didn't want to lie to his daughter. She mentioned that you were having some anxiety issues. Anxiety issues? Emma laughed. Dad, the only thing that makes me anxious is when she suggests that maybe I shouldn't talk to you so much because it's not healthy to keep living in the past. The observation hit Robert like a lightning bolt. She said that? Several times. And since Michael came into our lives, she's been even more insistent. Emma sighed. Dad, can I tell you something? But promise you won't get mad. I promise. I don't like Michael. He's too polished, you know. He treats Mom like she's a porcelain doll, and he talks to me like I'm 5 years old. Emma paused. And he keeps making comments about how it would be simpler if I just had one present dad instead of being divided between 2 worlds. Robert clenched his fists, but kept his voice calm. And how do you feel about that? That it's ridiculous, Emma said vehemently. Dad, you live in the United States, I live here, but that doesn't mean we're in two different worlds. You are my father, period. It's not a competition. Robert looked at Sarah and Emily, who were listening to the conversation with approving smiles. Emma, if I asked how you feel about our relationship, what would you say? That I wish it were closer, Emma replied without hesitation. Not because something is wrong, but because, well, I miss you, Dad. I wish I could talk to you every day, not just twice a week. Robert felt his eyes welling up. I miss you too, Princess. Every day. So why did you stop insisting that I spend the summer with you? Emma asked. Last year you always talked about me going to New York, but in the last few months, you never mentioned it again. Robert realized with a pang in his heart that he had internalized Julia's criticisms about being an absent father. I'd thought maybe you didn't want to anymore, that you were too busy with life there. Dad! Emma sounded almost indignant. I've always wanted to spend time with you. It was Mom who started making excuses about why it would be complicated for me to travel. Emily gestured to Robert, pointing to her own phone. She had typed a message on the screen. Invite her to come for July vacation. Emma, Robert said, feeling a new courage rising in his chest. How about you come spend a month here with me in July? We can explore New York together. I can show you where I grew up. Maybe we can travel to the Hamptons. Really? The excitement in Emma's voice was unmistakable. Dad, I would love that. Can I really stay a whole month? If you want, you can stay 2 months. But what about Mom? She always finds some reason. Robert looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Leave your mum to me, Princess. Do you want to come? I do, a lot. Dad, I was already thinking that you didn't want to see me anymore. Robert felt a deep pain in his chest. Emma, listen to me. I will always want you in my life, always. No matter what anyone says, no matter who comes into Mom's life, you are my daughter, and I love you unconditionally. I love you too, Dad. Emma was silent for a moment. Can I ask a kind of strange question? Of course. You seem different today. More firm. What happened? Robert looked at the 2 women sitting in front of him, one who had become his confidant and advisor, the other who had become an example of courage and integrity. I learned some important things about myself, he said, and about the kind of father I want to be for you. I like this change, Emma said. You seem more present, even from afar. After the call ended, Robert sat in silence for a few moments, absorbing everything that had happened. Finally, he looked at Sarah and Emily. Thank you, he said simply. For what? Sarah asked. For helping me remember what kind of man I want to be. Robert stood up and walked to the window, watching the garden darken with the onset of evening, and for teaching me that being a good father doesn't mean being perfect. It means being present, being honest, and fighting for what's important. Emily joined him at the window. You know what was the best part of this whole conversation? What? Your daughter loves you exactly as you are. She doesn't need you to change to like you. She just wants more time with you. Emily smiled. It's like how I feel about my mom. It doesn't matter that she works as a housekeeper instead of being a teacher. She's amazing just the way she is. Robert looked at Sarah, who was watching her daughter with radiant pride. You both taught me that family isn't about titles or status or money, he said. It's about choosing every day to be present in the lives of the people you love. At that moment, his phone rang. It was a message from Emma. Dad, I just told Michael that I'm spending July with you. He didn't seem very happy. I think you can expect a call from Mum soon. But no matter what she says, I want to go. Love you. Robert showed the message to Sarah and Emily, who laughed. Get ready for the storm, Sarah said. Let it come, Robert replied, feeling more confident than he had in years. This time, I know who I am and what's important to me. The storm that Sarah had predicted arrived in the form of 5 missed calls and a 3-minute audio message from Julia, all before 9 o'clock in the evening. Robert listened to the message on speakerphone in the presence of Sarah and Emily while they had tea in the kitchen, an evening ritual that had naturally established itself over the past few weeks. "Robert, you've crossed every line," Julia's voice echoed through the kitchen, laden with a fury he hadn't heard since the worst moments of the divorce. "How dare you fill Emma's head with fantasies about spending 2 months in the US? She has commitments here, school responsibilities, and Michael is planning a family trip to Italy in July." Sarah raised her eyebrows when she heard the mention of the family trip, and Emily made a face of disgust. "Furthermore," the message continued, "you know very well that Emma is still not emotionally prepared to handle drastic changes in environment. Dr. Thompson was very clear about that. And now she's agitated, questioning decisions that are for her own good. Call me immediately, Robert. We need to resolve this like responsible adults." Robert hung up the phone and looked at his companions. "What do you think?" "She's scared," Emily said directly. "Her reaction proves that your daughter going to the US wasn't in her plans." "And the mention of the family trip is interesting," Sarah added, stirring sugar into her tea. "It seems she was already making plans that excluded Emma." "You, without consulting Emma." Robert nodded, processing the observations. "Do you think I should call back?" "It depends," Sarah replied. "What's the goal? To argue with her or to protect your relationship with Emma?" "To protect my relationship with Emma." "Then don't call yet," Emily suggested. "Let her cool off first, and when you do call, have a clear strategy." Robert's phone vibrated again. This time it was a text message from Emma. "Dad, Mum is really mad. She said you are being irresponsible and that I'm too young to understand the complexities of the situation. But I'm not a kid. I'm 15 and I know what I want. Please don't let her convince me not to go." Robert showed the message to both of them. Sarah frowned. "She's pressuring Emma directly. That's not fair." "It's exactly what my dad used to do," Emily said, her voice growing more serious. "When my mom wouldn't give in to his manipulations, he would start working on me, trying to convince me that she was wrong." "And how did your mom handle that?" Robert asked. Emily looked at Sarah with admiration. "She always told me the truth, as much as I could understand. She never spoke badly of him, but she also didn't lie about his behavior." "Maybe that's what Emma needs right now," Sarah suggested. "Honesty about what's happening without putting her in the middle of the conflict." Robert typed a careful response. "Emma, your mum has the right to be concerned. Changes always cause anxiety for parents. But you also have the right to have an opinion about where you want to spend your vacation. Don't worry about anything right now. Tomorrow, I'll talk to her like 2 responsible adults, okay? Love you." The response came immediately. "Love you too, Dad. Thanks for treating me like I have a brain." Robert smiled, but was interrupted by the ringing of the home phone. Sarah answered with her usual professional courtesy. "Robert's residence. Good evening, Miss Julia." Sarah looked at Robert, who shook his head negatively. "I'm sorry, he's on an important business call and can't be interrupted. Can I take a message?" "I understand. I'll pass it on. Good evening." "What did she say?" Robert asked. "That you have until tomorrow at noon to resolve this situation, or she will take drastic legal measures." Sarah sighed. "And that you are manipulating a minor against her own mother." Robert felt anger bubbling up, but took a deep breath. "You both helped me a lot today, but I think I need to handle this on my own now." "You don't have to," Emily said firmly. "I mean, The call you will make alone, obviously, but you don't have to think alone about the strategy. What do you mean? Emily got up and went to the counter, grabbing a notepad. Let's make a list. First, what are the strengths of your position? Second, what are the weaknesses? Third, what is her real goal? And fourth, how can you get what you want without harming Emma? Robert was impressed with Emily's systematic approach. Where did you learn this? YouTube, she replied casually. There are a lot of good videos on conflict resolution, useful when your parents are fighting through you. For an hour, the three analyzed the situation from all angles. Robert found that verbalizing his concerns to Sarah and Emily helped him think more clearly than he ever could alone. Strengths, Emily read from her notes. You have established legal rights. Emma wants to come. Julia lied about several things today, and you have evidence that she is trying to manipulate the situation. Weaknesses, Sarah continued. You live far away. She has primary custody, and she apparently has significant financial resources through her new husband. Her real goal, Emily added, is to make Emma accept Michael as the primary father figure and you as an optional visitor. And your goal, Sarah concluded, is to maintain a real and close relationship with your daughter, regardless of the dynamics of her life in London. Robert studied the notes. So, what's the strategy? Focus on Emma's well-being, not on your rights as a father, Emily suggested. If Julia tries to turn this into an ego war, don't engage. Keep the focus on what's best for a 15-year-old. And document everything, Sarah added. Record the call if it's legal, or at least take detailed notes. If she's really thinking about legal measures, you'll need evidence of her behavior. Robert nodded, feeling more prepared. I'm going to call her now. Do you want us to step out? Sarah asked. Actually, Robert hesitated, could you stay? Not to interfere, but having you here keeps me more grounded. Emily smiled. Of course. We're your cheerleaders. Robert dialed Julia's number, activating the speakerphone quietly so only he could hear, but keeping Emily and Sarah's notes within view. Finally, Julia answered on the first ring. Robert, do you have any idea of the mess you caused today? Hi, Julia, Robert replied calmly. I understand that you're concerned. It's natural for a mother to worry when plans change. Concerned? Her voice rose an octave. Robert, you promised Emma things you can't fulfill, created unrealistic expectations. Julia, Robert gently interrupted, I spoke with Emma about spending the vacation with me. She showed genuine interest. I'm curious, had you already made other plans for July without consulting me? There was a revealing silence on the other end of the line. Michael's plans for Italy are tentative, Julia finally replied. Nothing set in stone. I see. So there's no real conflict of dates, just a question of choosing between two appealing options for Emma. Robert, it's not that simple. You're right, it's not, Robert agreed, consulting his notes. It's an important decision. How about we let Emma be part of that decision? She's 15, smart, capable of... Express your preferences. She's still a child, Robert. Children don't know what's best for them. Robert looked at Emily, who was exactly 15, and had shown more emotional maturity than many adults he knew. Julia. Emma is no longer a child, and even if she were, she has the right to have an opinion about where to spend her vacation. Robert kept his voice firm but respectful. What is your specific concern about her coming to the United States? Safety? Language? Culture? Robert, she doesn't know anyone there. You work all the time. Actually, Robert interrupted, she wouldn't be alone. She would have constant company, people who care about her, a safe environment. He looked at Sarah and Emily. And regarding work, I'm thinking of taking a vacation in July as well. It would be an entire month dedicated exclusively to Emma. Another silence. On the other end of the line, Julia, Robert continued, can I suggest something? How about the three of us, you, me, and Emma, have a video call tomorrow? Let's allow her to talk about what she wants. We can listen to her concerns and come to an agreement that works for everyone. That's a reasonable idea, Julia admitted reluctantly. Great. What time works for you? Robert ended the call 10 minutes later, having managed to schedule the video call and establish some basic parameters for the discussion. When he hung up, Sarah and Emily softly applauded. Him. That was impressive, Emily said. You managed to disarm all her tactics without getting into a fight. And you put Emma at the center of the decision, where she should be, Sarah added. Robert felt proud, but also nervous. Now the hard part, convincing Emma to express herself honestly tomorrow without making it seem like I'm putting her against her mom. Trust your daughter, Sarah simply said. From the minutes I heard of the conversation today, she seems to have inherited your intelligence and gained an extra dose of courage. And remember, Emily added, teenagers can detect manipulation from miles away. If you are honest and respectful, she will notice. If Julia tries to manipulate, she will notice that too. Robert nodded, feeling more confident about the future of his relationship with Emma than he had in months. For the first time, he felt like he was fighting for the right thing in the right way. The video call was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon, 9 in the morning in London, and Robert had spent the entire morning in a mix of nervousness and meticulous preparation. Sarah had suggested that he organize his home office for the call, removing elements that might seem intimidating and adding personal touches that showed his paternal side. Put Emma's picture on the desk where she can see it, Emily had advised during breakfast, and maybe some of the letters she sent you over the years. It shows that you keep the important things. At 2:50, Robert was sitting in front of the computer, adjusting the camera for the 10th time. Sarah lightly knocked on the door and entered, carrying a cup of coffee and a plate of homemade cookies. To calm the nerves, she said, placing the snack next to the computer. And the cookies are to show Emma a bit of our culture. Emily told me she loves sweets. You two think of everything, Robert commented, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. We're rooting for you, Sarah replied, and for her. A 15-year-old girl deserves to have a healthy relationship with her father. At 3 o'clock sharp, the computer emitted the familiar sound of the incoming call. Robert took a deep breath and accepted the call. The screen split, showing Julia sitting in an elegant armchair, wearing a cream blazer that surely cost a fortune, and Emma, wearing a colorful top, sitting on a nearby sofa. Hi, Dad, Emma waved enthusiastically at the camera. Wow, you look different, more relaxed. Robert smiled genuinely. Hi, Princess, it's good to see you. How was school today? Hi, Robert, Julia interrupted before Emma could respond. Let's get straight to the point, please. We have limited time. Actually, Mom, Emma turned to Julia, I cancelled my meeting with the girls today, just so we would have enough time for this conversation. There was a firmness in the teenager's voice that surprised even Robert. Emma, dear, Julia tried to soften her tone. I know you're excited about the idea of traveling, but we need to be practical about it. I am practical, Mom, Emma replied. I made a pros and cons list for each option. She held up a paper. Can I share? Robert exchanged a look of admiration with his daughter through the screen. Of course, Princess. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Emma straightened up on the sofa, clearly having prepared for this moment. Option 1. Italy with Mom and Michael. Pros. It would be my first time in continental Europe. Michael knows the best restaurants and Mom would be happy. Cons. I would be the third wheel on their honeymoon. I don't speak Italian and, she hesitated, looking at Julia, I don't feel super comfortable with Michael yet. Emma, Julia protested, Michael is making a real effort to have a good relationship with you. I know, Mom, and I appreciate that, but liking someone isn't something you force. Emma turned her attention back to the paper. Option 2. United States with Dad. Pros. It would be my first time in South America. Dad promised to show me where he grew up. I really miss him and... She smiled. It would just be the two of us, which hasn't happened in years. Robert felt his chest tighten with emotion. Cons, Emma continued. I don't speak English. It would be far from my comfort zone, and Mom would worry about me. Emma, Julia leaned forward. There are other practical considerations. Safety, for example. Mom, Emma interrupted her with a patience that was clearly being tested. New York is one of the largest cities in the world. It has excellent hospitals, a good security system, and Dad has lived there for 40 years. I did my research. Robert was impressed with his daughter's preparation. Emma, can I address the language issue? I could hire a tutor for you before the trip, and I have friends here who could help you get settled. Friends? Julia asked suspiciously. Robert hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. Sarah has worked with me for 8 years. She's a certified teacher, speaks English fluently, and has a daughter your age, Emma. They could meet. You have an employee who speaks English and has a teenage daughter. Emma seemed interested. That's cool. What's her name? Emily. And she is extraordinary. Very much like you, actually. Smart, brave, determined. Julia frowned. Robert, I don't know if it's appropriate to involve employees in Emma's upbringing. With all due respect, Julia, Robert said calmly, Sarah and Emily have become important parts of my life. If Emma comes to the United States, they would naturally be part of her experience here. Dad, Emma said, can I ask a direct question? Always. Why is this so important to you? I mean, I would love to go, but why now? Why are you insisting so much? The question caught Robert off guard. He looked at his daughter through the screen, seeing a maturity in her eyes that reminded him of Emily. Because I realized I'd been hiding behind work and distance for too long, he said honestly. When you were younger, I thought being a good father meant providing financially and solving practical problems. But now I understand that being a good father means being present, really knowing who you are, sharing experiences that you both will remember forever. Emma smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. And why did you change your mind now? Robert looked at the office door, where he knew Sarah and Emily were respectfully giving privacy to the conversation, but whose influence had transformed his perspective on relationships and responsibility. Because I met people who taught me the difference between controlling someone's life and truly caring for them, he said. And because I realized I was losing you without even trying to fight for our relationship. Julia cleared her throat. That's very touching, Robert, but it doesn't resolve the practical issues. Mum, Emma turned to Julia with a serious expression. Can I be honest about something? Julia nodded hesitantly. In the past few months, you've been trying to convince me that Dad doesn't care that much about me, that he's too busy, too distant, that Michael would be a better father. Emma paused. But talking to Dad today and yesterday, and actually in all our calls, I see a man who really cares about me, who wants to know me, who misses me. Julia paled. Emma, I never said. Not directly, Emma agreed. But your suggestions have been quite clear, and Michael also made some comments. She looked directly at the camera. Dad, I want to spend July with you, not because Italy wouldn't be nice, but because I feel it's important for our relationship, and because, honestly, I feel that if I don't go now, I might not get another chance. Why do you say that? Robert asked, alarmed. Emma looked uncomfortably at Julia. Because Michael has been talking about adoption, and about how it would be simpler if I only had one father present in my life. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert felt a cold anger rising in his chest, but kept his voice controlled. "Emma," he said calmly, "I want you to know one thing. No matter how many papers someone signs, no matter how many people come in and out of your life, I will always be your father, always, and I will always want you in my life." "I know, Dad," Emma said, wiping away a tear. "That's why I want to go to the United States. That's why this trip is important to me." Julia was silent for a long moment, clearly processing what she had just heard. Finally, she sighed. If this is really what you want, Emma, I won't stop you." Her voice was resigned. "But I want guarantees about safety, supervision, regular communication." "Of course," Robert replied immediately. "Any guarantees you need." Emma lit up. "Really, Dad, can I really go?" Julia nodded, though not very enthusiastically. "But with conditions, and I want to meet the people who will be around my daughter." "Sarah and Emily would be happy to meet you," Robert said. "In fact, how about they join our next video call? That way you can meet them before Emma travels." That would be acceptable," Julia agreed. Emma was practically bouncing on the couch. "Dad, this is going to be amazing. Can I start learning English now? And can you tell me about New York and about Sarah and Emily?" Robert smiled, feeling a happiness he hadn't experienced in years. "Princess, we will have all the time in the world to talk about all of that." After the call ended, Robert sat in silence for a few minutes, absorbing what had just happened. Emma was coming to the United States. They would have an entire month together, and for the first time he felt he truly knew his daughter, not just as someone he loved, but as someone he respected. Sarah and Emily appeared at the door, their faces glowing with curiosity and anticipation. "So?" Emily asked. Robert stood up, smiling wider than he had in years. "Emma is coming to the United States in July, and she really wants to meet both of you." The two women hugged each other and then enveloped Robert in a collective embrace. "Get ready," Sarah said, laughing, "because now you're going to have two smart and determined teenagers in your house at the same time." Robert laughed. "Honestly, I can't imagine anything better." June arrived with the energy of a city preparing for the New York winter, and the mansion in the Upper East Side buzzed with preparations for Emma's arrival. Robert had transformed into an obsessive planner, a trait that Sarah and Emily observed with a mix of amusement and affection. "Mr. Robert, it's your daughter, not the Queen of England," Sarah commented on a Tuesday morning as she watched him reorganize Emma's room for the third time. He had ordered it painted in soft shades of pink and blue, installed a new air conditioner, and bought furniture that could serve both a teenager and a young adult. I know," Robert replied, adjusting the desk for the fifth time. "But she's never been to the United States before. I want her to feel at home immediately." Emily, who was sitting on the new bed testing the mattress, laughed. "You know what will make her feel at home. You paying attention to her, not a perfect room." Robert stopped what he was doing and looked at Emily. "Do you really think so?" "I'm sure," she replied. "When I was little and we moved to New York, what made me feel at home wasn't the apartment my mom managed to rent, which was pretty small, by the way. It was her teaching me how to take the subway, showing me where to buy bagels, introducing me to the neighbors." "Emily is right," Sarah agreed. "Emma wants to experience your world, not be in a version of her room in London." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "So what's the plan? What should a London teenager do in New York?" "Let's make a list," Emily suggested, grabbing the notepad that had become a constant tool in their strategic conversations. "First, the tourist basics. Second, authentically American cultural experiences. Third, things that connect her to you specifically." For 2 hours, the three of them crafted an itinerary that blended classic tourist spots with everyday experiences. Emma would visit the MoMA and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but she would also learn how to make chocolate chip cookies in the kitchen. She would explore the Chelsea Market and Little Italy, but she would also accompany Robert to some work meetings to understand what he did professionally. "And there's one important thing," Emily added. "She needs time with other kids her age. She can't just be with adults for an entire month." "Are you offering to be her friend?" Robert asked. "Of course, but more than that, I can introduce her to some girls from my school. Girls who speak English well and can show her what it's like to be a teenager in America." Robert felt a wave of gratitude. "Emily, do you realize how important you've been to me, to this whole process?" "We help each other," she replied simply. "You taught me that there are adults who really listen to teenagers. That's rare." 2 weeks before Emma's arrival, something unexpected happened. Robert was in the office reviewing contracts when Sarah knocked on the door, looking nervous. "Mr. Smith, there's a call for you. It's from a private investigator." Robert furrowed his brow. "Private investigator? I didn't hire any investigator." "He said he was hired by Michael Morrison, your ex-wife's husband." Robert's blood ran cold. He answered the phone cautiously. "Robert Smith speaking." "Mr. Smith, my name is Michael Thompson. I'm a licensed private investigator in London." The voice had a heavy British accent. "I was hired by Mr. Morrison to conduct an investigation into your living conditions and ability to supervise a minor." Robert felt anger explode, but kept his voice controlled. "And why are you calling me directly?" "Because, sir, I found some inconsistencies in the information provided by my client." Thompson paused. "He claimed that you live alone, in conditions unsuitable for a teenager, that you have no family support structure, and that you may pose a risk to the girl's safety." "And what did your investigation reveal?" "That you live in a $5 million mansion in one of the safest areas of New York. You've had an employee for 8 years with excellent references, and your financial situation is extremely stable." Thompson hesitated. "Mr. Smith, in 15 years of my career, I've never been instructed to fabricate evidence, but that's exactly what Mr. Morrison asked me to do." Robert fell, silent, processing the information. "What exactly did he ask for?" "That I document evidence of inappropriate behavior, financial instability, or anything that could be used to question your visitation rights." Thompson sighed. "When I refused, he fired me and said he would hire someone more flexible with the truth." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have a teenage daughter, sir, and because I believe every child has the right to a healthy relationship with both parents when possible." Robert thanked Thompson and hung up, feeling a mix of anger and determination. Michael Morrison was trying to sabotage his relationship with Emma using lies. This meant that Julia was either being manipulated or was an active accomplice. Sarah, who had overheard part of the conversation, approached. "Mr. Smith, this is serious. They're trying to build a case against you." "I know." Robert ran his hands through his hair. "I need to talk to my lawyer, and I need to gather evidence that our home is a safe environment for Emma." "What kind of evidence?" Emily asked, appearing at the door. "Documentation that Emma will have appropriate supervision, a safe environment, suitable activities." Robert paused. "Actually, would you two be willing to do a recorded interview, as witnesses that Emma won't be left unsupervised?" "Of course," Sarah replied, "but I think you need more than that." "What do you mean?" "You need to show that Emma isn't just safe here, but happy," Emily suggested. "How about we document the preparations? We can show her room, the plans we've made, the people she'll meet." Robert nodded. "That's a good idea, but first I need to call Emma. If Michael is trying to sabotage the trip, she needs to know." The call to London was tense. Emma answered quickly, but her voice sounded different. more cautious, less excited. "Hi, Dad. How are you?" "Hi, Princess. You sound worried. Is everything okay?" Emma hesitated. "Michael has been asking some questions about you, about your house, your job, your finances, and my mom is acting strange, as if she were regretting agreeing to the trip." Robert clenched his fists. What kind of questions is Michael asking? "If you drink a lot, if you have girlfriends, if your house is safe, if you can really supervise me." Isabella sighed. "Dad, he's trying to convince me that you're not trustworthy." "And what do you think of those questions?" "They're ridiculous," Isabella replied vehemently. "You're my dad. If you had serious problems, I would know." Robert smiled for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. "Isabella, I need to tell you something. Michael hired a private investigator to try to find issues in my life that could prevent your visit." "He did what?" The indignation in Isabella's voice was palpable. "But the investigator called me because he refused to fabricate false evidence. Michael is trying to sabotage our trip, Princess." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Isabella spoke, her voice filled with mature anger. "Dad, that makes me even more determined to go. No one, not my mom, not Michael, no one is going to stop me from spending time with you." "Are you sure? Because this could complicate your life." "I'm absolutely sure," Isabella interrupted. "And Dad, I'm proud of you for telling me the truth. Michael probably expected you to try to hide this." After the call, Robert sat in the kitchen with Sarah and Emily, processing everything that had happened. "Do you know what this means?" Emily said thoughtfully. "It means your daughter has already chosen her side. She wants to be here with you, despite the pressures." "And it shows her character," Sarah added. "She doesn't let herself be easily manipulated." Robert nodded, feeling a mix of pride and concern. "I hope she understands what she's getting into." "She understands," Emily said confidently. "And do you know what's most important? She knows she can trust you to tell the truth, even when the truth is complicated." Robert looked at the two women who had become his chosen family, one who taught him about dignity and perseverance, the other who showed him that courage comes at any age. "Let's document everything," he said, "not just to protect ourselves legally, but for Isabella to have evidence that she made the right decision." And so, with Isabella's arrival just 2 weeks away, Robert felt more prepared than ever to fight for his relationship with his daughter, not just as a father, but as the upright man that Sarah and Emily had helped him become. JFK International Airport buzzed with the typical excitement of a July morning, but Robert felt as if he were in a bubble of anxiety and anticipation. He had arrived 2 hours earlier than planned, unable to stay home any longer waiting. Sarah and Emily accompanied him, both dressed in their best outfits for the occasion. Sarah in an elegant navy blue dress, and Emily in a white blouse with dress pants, her hair down, framing her face in a more mature hairstyle. "Mr. Robert, stop checking your phone," Sarah said gently, placing her hand on his arm. "The flight is on time. Isabella will arrive." What if she changed her mind? What if Julia convinced her not to come at the last minute? Robert ran his hands through his hair, messing up the carefully styled look. Emily laughed. "Your daughter sent 4 messages just today confirming she was excited, including a photo of her at JFK with a sign that said, 'New York, here I come.' She hasn't changed her mind." At 10:15, the arrivals board finally showed that the British Airways flight had landed. Robert felt his heart race so much that Sarah suggested he sit down for a few minutes. "Take a deep breath," she instructed. "Isabella needs to see you confident and relaxed, not like you're about to have a heart attack." "It's harder than it seems," Robert admitted. "It's been almost 2 years since I saw her in person." "And you both have changed a lot in that time," Emily observed. "She has grown. You have found yourself. It will be like meeting again." 40 minutes later, the international arrival doors opened and the first passengers began to appear. Robert positioned himself at the front of the line, holding a discreet sign with the name Isabella Smith, written in colourful letters. Emily's idea to make the moment more special. "There!" Emily pointed. "That's her, isn't it? Brown hair, pink suitcase." Robert looked in the indicated direction and felt the world stop. Isabella had grown. She was no longer the 13-year-old girl he remembered, but a stylish teenager, wearing dark jeans and a floral blouse, pulling a pink suitcase and carrying a backpack that seemed to contain half of her Nashville belongings. When she saw him, Isabella's face lit up with pure joy. "Dad!" She dropped the suitcase and ran towards him, throwing herself into his arms with a force that almost knocked him over. "Princess," Robert murmured into her hair, feeling tears he hadn't expected to stream down his face. "You're here. You're really here." "I've missed you so much," Isabella said, her voice muffled against his chest. "So much, Dad. And you're different, more present. Even hugging me, you seem more present." Robert laughed through his tears. "I've learned some important things in the past few months." Isabella pulled back slightly to study his face. "You look happier and more relaxed." Then she noticed Sarah and Emily waiting respectfully a few meters away. "And these must be the special people you mentioned." "Isabella," Robert said, wrapping his arm around his daughter's shoulders, "I want to introduce you to two very important people to me. This is Sarah Johnson, who has worked with me for 8 years and has become a dear friend and advisor." Sarah stepped forward with a warm smile. "Isabella, it's a great pleasure to finally meet you. Your dad won't stop talking about you." "And this is Emily, daughter of Sarah," Robert continued. "She's 16, one of the wisest people I know, and has a lot to do with the positive changes in my life." Emily extended her hand to Isabella. "Hi, welcome to the United States. I hope you're ready for a month of adventures." Isabella shook Emily's hand, but Robert noticed that she was discreetly studying the two women, clearly evaluating them. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," she said politely. "Dad spoke very highly of you in our conversations." As they walked toward the parking lot, Isabella began to bombard everyone with questions. "What's traffic like in New York? Is it true there are more than 12 million people? Sarah, are you really a teacher? Emily, what school do you go to?" Robert watched the interactions with growing relief. Isabella was genuinely curious, not just polite, and Sarah and Emily responded, naturally, without treating her like a princess or an intruder. "Isabella," Emily said when they reached the car, "can I ask a somewhat direct question?" "Sure. Was your mom nervous about you coming? Because when my parents separated, my mom always got anxious when I went to visit my dad." Isabella looked at Emily with a surprised and relieved expression. "Wow, you get straight to the point, huh?" "Yes, she was. And James, well, James even tried at the last minute to convince me it would be a bad idea." "And how did you handle that?" Sarah asked gently as they got into the car. "I told them I was 16, not 6, and that I could make my own decisions about where to spend my vacation." Isabella settled into the back seat next to Emily. "And if they really cared about me, they should support my relationship with my dad, not sabotage it." Robert almost crashed the car. "You really said that?" "I did, and it worked. Mom stopped trying to dissuade me, and James went quiet." Isabella smiled with satisfaction. "Sometimes you need to be firm with adults who think they can decide your life for you." Emily clapped her hands. "I like you. We're going to get along great." During the drive home, Robert watched in the rearview mirror as the two teenagers chatted animatedly. Isabella asked questions about Emily's school, her favorite places in New York, and Brazilian music. Emily, in turn, wanted to know about London, what it was like to study at a British school, and the cultural differences Isabella had noticed. "You know what's funny?" Isabella commented as they passed through the upscale neighborhood. "I imagine New York as a completely different city from London, but there are some similarities. The mixed architecture, the heavy traffic, people from all over the world." "That's true," Sarah agreed. "New York is a global city just like London, but you'll find that our pace of life has its own particularities." When they arrived at the mansion, Isabella was impressed but not intimidated. "Dad, it's beautiful, much bigger than I imagined." She turned to Sarah. "It must be a lot of work to keep all this organized." Sarah laughed. "It has its challenges, but I've learned to love this house over the years." Robert showed Isabella the room he had prepared for her, nervously watching her reaction. She entered, dropped her suitcase on the bed, and did a 360-degree spin, absorbing all the details. "Dad," she finally said, "it's perfect. But you know what impresses me the most?" "What?" "The photos." She pointed to the various framed photographs he had scattered around the room, pictures of her at different ages, some she didn't even know he had. "You really kept all these memories." "I cherish every moment we've shared, Princess." Isabella approached him and hugged him again. "Dad, I want you to know that deciding to come was easy. The hard part was waiting so long to do it." That night, during the dinner that Sarah had specially prepared for the occasion, a mix of mild international dishes to ease Isabella's adaptation, Robert watched his daughter interact with her two chosen families. Isabella asked insightful questions about life in the United States, showed genuine interest in Emily's experiences at school, and enthusiastically praised Sarah's cooking. More importantly, she seemed relaxed, happy at home. "Isabella," Robert said as they were finishing dessert, "how would you like this month to be? What kind of experiences do you want to have?" She thought for a moment. "I want to know your world, Dad. Not just the tourist spots, but how you live, work, and have fun. I want to understand who you are now." She looked at Sarah and Emily. "And I want to meet the people who are important to you." "That can be arranged," Emily said with a mischievous smile. "By the way, Isabella, are you ready to learn how to make chocolate truffles tomorrow morning?" "I'm ready to learn anything," Isabella replied, "especially if you guys are my teachers." Robert leaned back in his chair, watching the three women in his life animatedly discuss plans for the next day. For the first time in years, he felt that his home was truly complete, not because he had acquired new things, but because it had filled up with genuine relationships and true love. That night, as Isabella settled into her room and Sarah and Emily said goodnight to go rest, Robert spent a few minutes on the porch, watching the lights of New York twinkle in the distance. His phone buzzed with a message from Isabella, sent from her room. "Dad, thank you for fighting for me, for us. This is already the best month of my life. I love you." Robert smiled, typing back, "Thank you for giving me the chance to be the dad I always wanted to be for you. I love you too, Princess." For the first time in years, Robert Smith went to bed knowing exactly who he was and why his life mattered. The next morning, he would wake up to his first full day alongside his daughter, who had learned to fight to hold on, surrounded by people who loved him not for what he possessed, but for who he had chosen to become.